Welcome, Checkmk enthusiasts, partners, friends. I'm really glad that we can finally meet after 3 years of distance and silence. It's really super cool to see you all again. I've already had some nice talks with many guys. Many of you I know for many years. Also, we have, of course, new faces, and it feels really well to keep in touch with you again. I mean, we made 2 online conferences. Some of you probably attended the online conference. We really worked hard on them to make a kind of real life feeling, but I think, to be honest, online conference sucks, and this is the real thing. So it's really great fun for me, and also we have a new location, as you can see. I think that's maybe the top location in Munich for such an event. It's also a home location because our office is nearby. Yeah, I hope you like it here. So this is the 8th conference. I very well remember the first conference we did very long ago. So I have a question. Who was at the first Checkmk conference from the people here? Wow, that's really great. That's really great. At that time, it was 50 participants, and we ramped up to 90, which was at that time a good success. And today we have 300 participants. I think it's 320 or something. And the funny thing is, in the first conference, I had time to introduce every single employee of the company, give a short CV, and explain what the guy does. And I think we can do the same thing today. So if we limit this to 5 minutes, we have 100 people here. I calculated it would be about 8 hours, so maybe skip it. Yeah, also this is the first time we make a hybrid conference, which is technically a bit challenging. That means that we have a complete live stream of all the talks. It might be the case that you are visible in some video from behind. Also, when you ask a question, the voice of your question will be part of the live stream. I hope you don't mind, but you also can make online questions. We come to that later. Yeah, so the first day will be very technical. We give insight from our labs, from our developers. All the speakers, besides Jan, are hardcore developers of Checkmk, very long members of the tribe already, and it's going to be very interesting. And of course, we have an evening event. This time we are going to Blitz at the Deutsches Museum. It's a very famous location. Deutsches Museum is very old. It was, or maybe is still, the largest technical museum in the world. It's under reconstruction for about 10 years. And I guess after our evening event, they need another 10 years maybe to clean up. Also, they are supposed to have the best PA in Munich. So I think we'll have fun this evening. Also, we have a little surprise event. Yeah, so tomorrow we get some more talks. We get talks from users and partners. And also we'll speak about the future of Checkmk and of course, about the new developments as always. Yeah. When you want to ask questions, you're very encouraged to ask questions. This is what makes the conference fun for me. So the sillier the questions are, the more fun we all have. So don't hesitate to ask. If you have a question, simply raise your hand. We have microphones here around. It's very important that you use the microphone because otherwise in the stream you will be silent. You also can have questions online, even if you are here. So we have a voting system. You go to the Slido and enter the name of the conference, as you can see here. Then you can enter question, and there's a voting system where you can upvote existing questions, and Martin will then read the questions and we talk about it. Also, we encourage you, there's a feature built in where you can give us some feedback, how you like the talks in the conference. Please use that so we get interesting feedback about what's happening here, how you liked it. Also, we have the stickers. So that's really a very important thing. We use the stickers. who was at the 5th conference already knows it. We have some boards, and you can place the stickers in order to vote for proposed features that we should implement. So you have 8 stickers, so it's about €100 per sticker. So use it wisely, and we really need that information in order to prioritize the development of the future. We also have a live translation. This time, usually we had that from German to English. This time we try very hard to speak English ourselves. We apologize for bad language, bad English. If it happens, I hope you understand. If you want to have the talks in German, we have translators who can translate into German, Austrian, and Swiss dialect. So please choose when you get the microphone. One last thing from my side. If you don't want that photos are taken from you, please tell us at the help desk. Then we know that we mark you out or cut you out or whatever. And you get a pink hat, and you wear the pink hat so we know that you don't like to be photographed. Yeah, so let's have fun. That's an important thing on the conference, at least for me. So now let's go to the actual talk, to the business. Jan will take over, and yeah. Okay. So Jan, thanks for convincing me to go to this location this year, because otherwise we were at the hotel at the Holiday Inn, which was very nice, but this was a very good idea from you.
It's the right place to be.
Yeah, to invest the extra money.
Exactly.
So I appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to be here and see every one of you again. Feel a bit anxious seeing so many faces after 2 years. And as always, Mathias and I will divide and conquer roles a bit. Mathias will be the host for these 2 days. He will ensure that this stays a lively and interactive event. And I will give the intro talk, essentially summarizing a bit what we see over the next 2 days to lay the foundation of what we essentially discuss.
Yeah, so let's have fun with what Jan has to say.
Good. Your IT. And in today's world, that means we monitor your cloud, your public cloud vendors' infrastructure. We monitor your data centers, as always. And for some of you, it also means we monitor your edge. There could be retail stores, electricity substations, or similar parts of your network which are the edge. And so when we think about what we do in our roadmap, we try and constantly advance the state of monitoring of what Checkmk can do in these areas. Now, when we do that, same as last year, we try to think in 3 different dimensions. And the one is always we want to build the best product for hybrid monitoring, for monitoring the cloud, the data centers, up to your edge. And in today's world, that means there are traditional stacks, there are more cloud-native stacks with Kubernetes and other technologies, and both are the reality of today's IT. And so we, as the monitoring tool that does all of that, need to be able to monitor both of these worlds equally well. Now, since the IT is so distributed and complex, we always said as one of our key points to actually embed the operator's experience in the product. You don't need to know all of those things. You don't need to know the 100 metrics, which one is exactly the right one. We want to work with you, which we've always done, to essentially embed your knowledge when we develop features into that product for everyone else to use it. The second piece that was always important for us is integration. The monitoring system is in the heart of the IT, and so we integrate with your IT service management workflows, the services nows, the Jiras, etc. And monitoring has also become a bigger universe over the last years. Almost every company has many monitoring tools that serve distinct needs, have different origin in the past. And so to some of these that you commonly use, we also need to integrate well. These are still part of one monitoring that you as a user want. And the third one, and that comes back to our DNA, we are an open source company with an open core business model. We want to ensure you can extend the product yourselves if you so wish. If you're not, it's ready-made to go. So we want to give you the power to do that, and that's a lot about APIs in the end. Now, the next product that's coming out is Checkmk 2.1. It will be released in roughly 4 weeks. It's in the beta phase, and I encourage every one of you to use it. And I want to highlight or use this three-step framework to think through how we prioritize the features of that release. Obviously, the bulk of the features are in innovate, but we always have some for integrate and some for extend to ensure we address all of those three lenses. Now, the starting point, as I said, is we need to monitor everything, and part of that is the cloud-native world. And the most important technology that has emerged over the last years is Kubernetes in that world. It has basically gone from 0 to being the de facto standards for lots of application development in less than 10 years. And we monitored that for a while, I think for 3 years now or so. And that was important. It helped a lot of people. It was a good toe in the water. But it was not a really great monitoring yet, because we lacked some critical data and there wasn't already a lot of operator know-how built into the product. And given the complexity of Kubernetes, it's actually important to do that. And so Martin, with a team of developers, essentially worked with 10 of you in the community here, all with different Kubernetes flavors. Plain vanilla Kubernetes, different cloud provider managed Kubernetes, VMware Tanzu, OpenShift, you name it, to really understand what is the data, where do we get it from, and especially what problems are you actually trying to solve in your daily way, so that we can structure the data in a way that makes sense to you, if you're a cluster admin, if you're an application development team, to serve your needs. And I used essentially the dashboarding we integrated with Checkmk 2.0 to bring that to life. Martin will talk about it tomorrow at, I think, 2 p.m. I think it's a great feature for everyone, and it really opens the path with great monitoring for the Kubernetes world. The second part was always about scaling the system, and that's about performance. And so in the last year when we worked on performance, we worked on the performance of the core, reducing the memory footprint and essentially making it happen that you can monitor more with one installation. And this year we also worked on performance, but performance has different dimensions. And this year we worked essentially on the performance that you feel as a user in terms of speed. And that's the configuration performance or the performance of the user interface. And especially when you go to very large installations of several thousands or 10,000s of hosts, there are lots of computations to be made, especially when writing a configuration, but also in other cases, when you have thousands of users or thousands of folders. And we essentially optimized these use cases. The key feature that Lars will talk about is building the configuration incrementally, and that drastically reduces the time it takes for activate changes, one of the very common workflows to happen. But you see it also in other parts of the system when you navigate through a large folder hierarchy, that this has become much faster. The third one, after performance, is essentially the dashboarding, which we introduced last year. We took that further this year and essentially added new visualization options. For example, the ability to add inventory data to your dashboards, the ability to show host or service states and similar. And we also, for the first time now, have a couple of off-the-shelf dashboards for Linux, single cluster, Windows, many for Kubernetes, to give you a start. And Marcel will talk about how you can easily, essentially, clone that and tailor to your specific needs. Another topic that's very important in the security world is securing monitoring systems, because essentially they run in the heart of your IT. We saw lots of state actors over the last years starting cyber attacks. And so monitoring system has to be built securely, and we need to make sure you can actually operate it securely. And in our last conference, when we also did this voting that Mathias just described, 2 security features were the most highly rated features. And they were essentially 2-factor authentication for the login and SAML support for single sign-on. And both of them are now part of 2.1. But we also added other pieces. We improved the security of logins in general. We worked a lot on securing communication. And the most visible feature is that the Linux and Windows agents are now encrypted by default with TLS. That actually changed the architecture quite a bit, so we talk about that in a lot of detail. We worked on the password store to make it more secure. So lots of things in the security area, given that it's so important. And lastly, no conference would be a good conference without showing that slide. Obviously, Checkmk is about monitoring a lot. And this year, we crossed the mark of 2,000 plugins. And this is only one relevance for marketing. But it's obviously also relevant for you because there's much more every year that you can connect to. This is essentially all the innovation on the product. But as we said, integration is important. And last year, we introduced one key integration feature to automate Checkmk or to integrate it with other systems, and that was the REST API. And when we essentially surveyed you as to what were your most favorite features in Checkmk 2.0, the two most favorites were A, the new user experience, and B, the REST API. So lots of companies are using it extensively by now. But it wasn't complete last year. Parts were missing. The most important piece that was missing were the rule sets. And so for 2.1, we essentially completed that journey, deprecating the old web API, moving to the new REST API, adding lots of new features. There are two things that are marked in white. These are not yet final, and we patched them into the 2.1 once they're ready. But essentially, the REST API is now complete. The second piece of integration I talked about is integrating with other monitoring tools, which we've done in the past a lot. So NTOP, which you know has been very deeply integrated into Checkmk for network flow monitoring. But essentially, we focused on 3 different vendors this year. They are Grafana, InfluxDB, and Datadog, all with a bit different flavors. For Grafana, we had an integration, I think, since about 3 or 4 years now. And we essentially completely reworked that integration. It's a new connector that is A, written against the newest Grafana API. B, it is much simpler on how you set it up and configure. And C, it's actually much more secure. And that's why we redid that connector. The second piece is InfluxDB. InfluxDB is a time series database used by some of our customers. For similar use case, we essentially export metrics data out of Checkmk into InfluxDB and fuse them with other data from other systems. Sometimes you then display them in Grafana, and sometimes you simply use that for analysis. Again, for many years, there was an InfluxDB integration through a protocol called Graphite, but this was actually deprecated by InfluxDB, so we actually had to integrate that natively. And we added features that many of you asked for a long while to be added. For example, the ability also export labels with metrics and other things. Marcel will talk about all these 3 integrations and what they do tomorrow. The last one is Datadog, and that's a bit different flavor. Whereas in the first 2, we export data. From Datadog, we actually import data. And that is because a common use case that we see at larger clients is that a development team somewhere uses a Datadog. They monitor applications. But the problems of these applications are not always developer problems to be solved, but they could be solved by some other team in the company. And so you need to know the alerts of Datadog. And so we export the alerts and events from Datadog into Checkmk so that you can use your monitoring to do all the alerting to your ops teams. The last piece of the innovate, integrate, extend is extend, so the open community piece. And in that open community piece, we essentially added one product feature. Last year, we added the check RP. This year, we added something very different. We added translations. And the context of that is that we now have customers that we know of because they're commercial customers in 50 countries. We have open source users and many more. And so there's naturally the need to localize some of that to some users. And we had a community project by someone in France who translated a lot of the user interface in French. Now, over the last years, with machine learning becoming so good, the machine translations of language pieces have become actually very good by now. And so we machine translated the user interface into 7 languages and added a community tool called WebLate so that you as a community member can now actually edit the translation if you want to. One of our Japanese partners actually did that extensively for Japanese, for example. But there are obviously other things in the community. There is the Checkmk Exchange, which you know, the place where you can add your own developed plugins and make them usable by many more. And I think it's a very great place to exchange ideas. And secondly, or thirdly, there is GitHub. And for GitHub, we actually weren't very good over the last 2 years because we were too slow merging requests. So there was some discontent in the user base that we added, people added pull requests, then it took us too long to merge them. And so essentially we now changed our internal processes. Every developer sprint we have a developer assigned to work on pull requests. We still focus it on bug requests because on features we have all our priorities on the roadmap to decide upon, so it's focused on bug requests. But we hope that this approach, which worked actually very well over the last 2 or 3 months, makes a difference. And so far the feedback we got was very good. And then there are other things that actually make a community, and the home of the community is essentially our forum. By now we have, I think, 4,000 users in the forum that provide each other support, answer questions, many of those reading, a lot of those actually very active, with some community heroes here supporting many other users, so thanks a lot for that. And over the last years, it actually also become part to collaborate. And I want to highlight 2 examples. The first was Log4j. So when the Log4j vulnerability appeared and hit the world, and everyone scrambled to identify where in all of these IT systems were files that needed to be patched, then 2 of the community, that's Christian, who you know as Doc in the community, and Thomas, who you know as THL-CMK, actually worked together to build a Log4j scanner. Checkmk is no security tool, but it's actually installed at many of your systems, and so it's a great place to scan. And together they iterated over several versions. I think it has now become one of the most downloaded packages basically of the last year, and the article we wrote about it is actually the most read article on the blog. So for this specific problem, it helped a lot, and I think it was very beneficial for many people in the community. The second example is SAML. Now for SAML authentication, the technical feature necessary was actually included last year already in the version. But what was missing was a good documentation, because actually you can have very different setups, and how you configure that actually varies. And user GlowSum actually took our initial documentation, tested it out in various facets, and then this formed the basis for our own documentation. Another great example, part of the forum, how this also helped everyone else. And obviously we have events, community events every month or 2 months so, and we have a blog where we try to embed best practices such as how you monitor networks in SMP, or the example of Log4j. So I think it has become a striving place, that community, and it's great to see how it's evolving. Now with these 3 things, innovate, integrate, extend, especially here, this is what will be the 2.1. Obviously there are many smaller things, and we talk about that during the day, but these are the major topics of the next release that we dive on, and as I said, roughly 4 weeks until it will be released. And then the natural question is, what happens next? What's the roadmap for the next 12 months? And again, for the purpose of this talk, I just highlight a few things, since it would otherwise be a bit too long. But the key point is that we double down on the cloud. Now we focus a lot on building great Kubernetes monitoring. The next step is that we essentially take the monitoring that we have for the cloud, which is actually very good already. There's lots of AWS things you can monitor. There's pretty good coverage for Azure, no coverage yet for Google Cloud. And the first piece is actually to make that coverage great across these 3 providers. And those who follow our commits have seen that, for example, for Google Cloud, we actually have a very strong foundation already. The second piece is to make that usable in a more variety of settings. And a classical use case that, for example, comes up more often is that people want to actually monitor on-premise from the cloud, because these are smaller sites, because it's company policy for different reasons. And for that, the current agent architecture, pulling the data, does no longer work because of the tunneling through the firewalls, etc. And so essentially, we turned around the connection of the agent that pushes the data to the cloud, and we added a very neat feature, which I think is actually interesting in every environment, the auto-registration. So the auto-registration will actually automatically take that host, if it's an agent system, give it a name based on a naming scheme, add it to folders based on rules. So all the process of a host appearing in dynamic infrastructures can be done automatically. And that complements the mechanism that exists so far, dynamic configuration daemon, that focused on piggyback hosts. This one is for agent-based hosts. And lastly, it's cloud deployments. Now, if you basically deploy Checkmk at AWS or another vendor, you take a Linux image and install it on it. And that's actually the requirement by some of our customers. Other customers would prefer to get an image from a cloud store, from an AWS store, for example. And this we will build for AWS and Azure, that if you want, you can get an image directly with sizing recommendations, and we talk about how that works later tomorrow. All of that we'll release as one, same as Kubernetes now, that it becomes a great new piece of monitoring. Kubernetes obviously is a big topic on its own, and so we will continue doing it. One aspect that is currently missing that we add over the next 3 months or so is OpenShift. OpenShift is simply architecturally a bit different in how it's set up, so everyone who monitors Kubernetes takes a second approach to how they monitor OpenShift that's a bit distinct from the others, so it's some tweaking. That's one dimension. The second dimension is application monitoring. Obviously, Kubernetes is a container to run applications, or an environment to run applications. And so we want to move closer and help you monitor these applications better than you can do that today. And lastly, we always want to keep focus on the user interface. And there we do 2 things. One is, from time to time, we fundamentally re-architect a component. We did that, for example, for the microcore in the last year. And the next one will be the user interface. So we're doing a lot of work under the hood that makes us, or enables us to develop features quicker, more consistent than today. And in terms of features, we will focus mostly on configuration. Because when we ask customers, especially new customers, for their user journey, what was more challenging and what was less challenging, configuration is the topic that comes up most, and we want to make that easier. On integration, we will actually work on one single topic to bring another project closer to Checkmk. And that's synthetic monitoring. Now, many of you might actually not know the term because it's a term that's more commonly used in the US than in Europe. In Europe, many call it end-to-end monitoring. It's essentially monitoring an application from the user perspective. So how would I, as a user in a certain place X, is that website available? Is it responsive enough? Is the functionality actually working? That's what synthetic monitoring is about. And we had a community project for 2 years now by Simon Megle called RobotMK. And he essentially used a very popular testing framework, the robot framework, which is able to test both modern web applications, but also legacy applications or other on-prem applications, because it can make use of different test libraries. And Simon presented that last year on the conference, and a lot of you really liked it. The talk got very high ratings, the topic got high ratings, and we did the roadmap voting at the end. It came out as one of the highest voted features. And so over the last months, we essentially worked together to think through the user journey. How do you actually author test, execute a test, analyze a test? How does it work with other tools? So we did a lot of user research and decided to join forces and bring that topic closer or into Checkmk over the next 12 months. And Simon will give a talk on that tomorrow. And the last piece on extension, we go back to the APIs, like last year. And last year we worked on the new Check API, the API to develop plugins, and that I think set a very good foundation for developing plugins. But some topics actually missing that you frequently use. For example, the user interface integration of the plugin. How do you write metrics and similar? And we will start the journey of APIing this part so that everyone knows it's a stable API. These are the things that you can use, starting with the metrics. That's essentially what's ahead for the next 12 months. Many smaller things as well, but the things I wanted to highlight. Now I want to spend the last few minutes talking about our little company here, the tribe. And the tribe luckily is growing. We are now roughly 100 employees. We added, I think, 15% of the workforce over the last 3 months, so actively growing. And the key why we are growing is in the end because we want to have the man and women power to actually deliver great product innovations as we continue going. And we were a bit lucky that the monitoring industry wasn't hit hard by the crisis. It was a topic that everyone still needed, and so our customers, that shows our enterprise customer growth, basically continued as before, and we are now nearing roughly 3,500 customers in 50 countries. And you see many of the logos here that we are actually allowed to share. Now, because everything started as a product-led company, that means 100% of the product, focus on the product, and success will follow. When I joined in 2018, and you can see we were actually on a very great curve already in 2018, the size of our marketing organization was 0, and the size of our sales organization was 1. And so by the nature of this, we did lots of word of mouth marketing, and this event here, the conference, was actually the key event for that. And that's why we have a very strong customer base in German-speaking markets, because this was the natural nucleus for word of mouth. But if you look at our revenue base, our second biggest market is actually the US. You need some of the US company logos here. And for US customers, it's a bit more difficult to work with us as a company because we are in Germany, our contracts are in German law, our support hours are in German time zone and so forth. And so it would actually be great to move closer to support also customers on the other side of the Atlantic. And this is what we will be doing. We'll be moving to the US, not moving, but adding an office. There will be a sales, consulting, and support office, and we open that in Atlanta, Georgia. That's the nice city that you see here. And why Atlanta, Georgia? Because it has a great tech talent base. Georgia Tech University, many other universities are there. Lots of software companies have actually opened shop there. It's 6 hours time zone away, so it's actually logistically very convenient for us, and we can fly in directly from Munich. Atlanta itself has the biggest airport in the US, so lots of opportunities to travel from there. And so we will set up shop there. Those who know Atlanta, it's in the Ponce City market, one of the most iconic sites in Atlanta, an industrial building essentially. Now from our side, 2 colleagues will move over. Elias, who leads our international sales and partner channel, will move over actually with his family. And Anastasius, who you know, many of you know as a consultant and support, maybe from pre-sales, he will also move over to have a strong launch team and to actually recruit the local organization and build it up and ensure it is tribed in. As part of this, we're doing just a little experiment that I want to highlight. We are trying out a podcast. And a podcast, obviously nothing new, but still many people like it. And we are trying out something that is actually not Checkmk marketing related. It's a blog on all things ops. DevOps, IT ops, AI ops. Elias will be hosting that. We've just done, I think, the first episode with Jeremy Profit from Eddy Financial. I think we have very interesting guests. The last speaker was the Chief Information Security Officer of IBM Cloud. So maybe something to try out for you and let us know whether you like it or not. It's an attempt to try and generate more ops know-how and distribute some ops know-how among us and have something interesting to talk about. Good. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. And now we get into the real nitty-gritty, and actually I think what most of you are here for, the tech stuff, the system D sockets and other things.
So thanks Jan for this insight into present and future.
Oh, wow.